Good afternoon. I'm Abby Livingston from Washington, D.C., and I want to thank you all for joining us today for our virtual event with the Texas Tribune. I'm here today with Democratic House candidate Sima Ladjevardian. We'll be discussing her campaign to represent the Houston-based Texas 2nd Congressional District ahead of the 2020 election. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping items. First, early voting in Texas begins next Tuesday, October 13th. For the latest election news, you can subscribe to our weekly 2020 newsletter at trib.it/2020. Next, we want to thank our sponsor, AT&T, for supporting today's conversation. Though donors and corporate sponsors underwrite our events, they play no role in determining the content, panelists, or line of questioning. Finally, I'd like to introduce today's guest, Sima Ladjevardian. She is a Houston attorney and political activist. As an activist, she's worked to elect candidates up and down the ballot, including serving in senior roles in Beto O'Rourke's Senate and presidential campaigns. Last December, she shook up the Democratic primary to challenge Republican incumbent Dan Crenshaw when she entered the race in the final moments before the filing deadline. Despite Crenshaw's hefty multi-million-dollar stockpile, Democrats say that Mrs. Ladjevardian's race is one to watch this cycle. Thank you so much, Sima, for joining us, and let's get started. So my first question for you is my favorite question, or not, it's the question I like to ask in the pandemic. How are you doing amid all of this?
That's a great question. Honestly, I get really a lot of strength from talking to everyone and really seeing how the community has come together to help everyone and really understanding how it is more important than ever to make sure that we have strong leadership that actually represents people and helps people. So I'm just very positive. I'm very hopeful, and I'm doing good.
So I was reading up on your background, and I'm just fascinated. Were you in Iran during the revolution? Was that when y'all left?
Yes, I was around 11 when the revolution happened, and it was chaos and very crazy times. And we just had to leave. We had to flee and left, and never haven't been, we just had to pretty much take everything and left the chaos of a revolution. And really, when we came here, it was for the incredible power and the promise of the American dream that I had looked up to, heard about all my life, and came here, studied hard, the really grateful immigrant story of being afforded so many opportunities. And since I've been here, I've been in Houston for the past 30 years, really trying to give back as much as I can to this incredible place that has accepted me and has given me so much.
And so how did you get to Houston?
So, I have to say, I traveled a lot. We went, directly after the revolution, we were in Europe for a couple of years, and then I moved to California, and I met my husband in California. So I came to Houston for love. I've been here over 30 years, and we have 2 wonderful kids, and that's why I came to Houston.
So this congressional district, it winds its way around Houston. It includes parts of Kingwood, Montrose. It's been hit by Hurricane Harvey. Not that long ago, I was going through the numbers. Republicans ran up 2-to-1 margins in this district. Why is it competitive this cycle?
So Trump won this district in 2016 by 9 points. Beto lost the district just by 1 point, which is 3,000 votes. The district is all within Harris County, which is one of the fastest growing counties and the most diverse counties. This district is 40% minority and very young, very educated, and the dynamics have just completely changed. And since 2018, we've had over 60,000 new registrants. So the dynamics have completely changed.
And so your opponent, Dan Crenshaw, is he's a fundraising juggernaut. He's one of the brightest stars in the freshman class. Texas Republicans are looking at him for the future as a possible statewide candidate. I even hear the word presidential campaign thrown in there someday for him. Is this intimidating to run against someone like that?
Not at all. I mean, as an immigrant, as a woman, as a cancer survivor, I've always, defied the odds. And one of the reasons I'm running is because I really think the people of this district are hurting. And Crenshaw ran on a lot of the promises that he broke, one of them being, lowering down prescription drug prices, letting Medicare negotiate it. And he went to D.C. and completely forgot about his constituents. And his concern has been really more national attention than anything else. And yes, he does. He is raising a lot of money, but 80% of it is outside of Texas. And he's just more concerned about his national image and his future than what actually people of this district need. And that is why I'm running.
And so if there's any Democrat you are most closely associated with, it's former Congressman Beto O'Rourke. You were a senior advisor to him in both the Senate and the presidential campaigns. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Was he right when he, on the presidential debate stage, said in 2019, hell yeah, we're going to take our AR-15? I know that gun control is a major issue in Houston. What did you think when you heard him say that?
Look, this was not his stance in the Senate race. He was very emotional there. We've had 3 mass shootings in Texas that was spurred on by a lot of the divisiveness and hatred coming from the White House, and pretty much enabled by people that are followers of him, that had resulted in a massive shootout in El Paso. But it is very clear that we need gun sense. I'm a firm believer of the Second Amendment. I used to go hunting with my dad. But in Texas, 9 out of 10 Texans believe in universal background checks. 4 out of 5 NRA gun holders believe in having background checks. We're talking about common sense, gun sense. I think we have to ban assault weapons. We need to make sure we push for our red flag laws. And definitely have closed the gun show loophole and have background checks.
So one of the hardest things, at least professionally, obviously there's so much else going on in people's personal lives, but for me professionally, the most difficult thing about the pandemic is I'm not in the state. I'm in Washington, D.C., watching this from afar. So whenever I talk to people in the state, I'm like, what are you seeing? What are you feeling? What are your instincts? What is your gut on which presidential candidate carries the second congressional district?
100% Vice President Biden, because COVID is at the forefront on anybody's mind. The fact that we've had our elected leaders Crenshaw has had really an abysmal response to the crisis. He's been putting out lies and disinformation from day one, questioning whether masks help. Back in March, in April, he called Hidalgo mask order unjust, and May 22nd, he questioned again, do masks actually help? Does social distancing actually help? Go towards June. He even said, our hospital capacities are fine. Mid-June, he holds 2 in-person maskless events in July, where our death toll is at its highest. A group of 100 bipartisan doctors beg him to stop putting out all this disinformation. He doesn't even talk about the death toll when it was the highest that we had in the past 4 months. Again, in August, he holds in-person event. And then in September, when the president comes out that he had actually, he admitted that he had downplayed really about the virus and he knew about it, Crenshaw comes out and says, he had good intentions doing that. And I think, to me, it's unconscionable when you have leaders in that kind of a position, when you have leaders that have such a platform, when young people look up to them, put out wrong facts and disinformation. And, we've had 16,000 people have died in Texas, and it is at the forefront of everything. It definitely is a big thing on the ticket. And he has been one of Trump's biggest enablers, and he has been spewing out disinformation the same way. Even as of last week, while the president was in a hospital because of COVID, Crenshaw again held an in-person maskless event. And I think it's just wrong.
And so with Vice President Biden, are there any policy differences? I mean, there is the Democratic Party has become very sprawling in a big tent. Are there any policy differences you have with him?
Look, I think all of our concerns and the major concern in this district, it was before the pandemic, it is healthcare. Being a cancer survivor, that's really important to me because I've seen what having high quality, affordable healthcare does and not having it happen. So my number one concern is to make sure that everybody has access to high quality, affordable healthcare. I want to make sure that everybody who has their private insurance keeps it. We have to make it better. ACA has to be fortified. There's been a lot of things in it that were stripped away by the administration. We have to open up enrollment, allow a public option for Medicare, and we have to protect in the middle of this pandemic where you have a president and someone like Crenshaw who are pushing to gut healthcare in a state where 1 out of 5 before the pandemic were not covered, 1 out of 3 right now, and you have 1 out in 7 children in Harris County alone who are not covered. It's just unconscionable to me to be pushing to cut healthcare. So, protecting pre-existing condition, just in this district, we have 340,000 people with pre-existing condition. COVID is also going to be a pre-existing condition. So really addressing that is a really big, important thing. And I know the other thing that is so important is, again, bringing down prescription drug prices. That is 90,000 people a year, not because they don't have access to their drugs, which is life-saving, or they go through bankruptcies. And the fact that, again, someone like Crenshaw campaigns on something like this, goes there, and then just because he's one of Trump's enablers, just goes down, against something that he campaigned on. So we're all on the same page with the vice president. Healthcare is the number one thing we have to address, we have to take care of, and take care of our constituents.
And so if you did get elected to Congress, what we're kind of anticipating as observers, if it's assumed the majority will stay with Democrats, one of the biggest fights in the new year might be over Medicare for all. And I didn't hear that when you were talking about your healthcare positions. Do you support Medicare for all?
No, I believe that you should fortify the ACA as someone who has a pre-existing condition. Everybody who has private insurance should be able to keep it. Now, with so many unemployments because of COVID, it's very important to open up enrollment. We have to allow subsidies for premiums, and it's ways to make that better. But I think everybody who has it should have. We should open the public option for anybody who wants for Medicare. And of course, we have to push for our state that we expand Medicaid, which is so important.
So you were talking earlier about Congressman Crenshaw's campaigning tactics. You said he was doing in-person events. One of the biggest divides tactically in the Democratic Party has been door knocking. And I'm curious, is your campaign door knocking, and what are your positions on that strategy?
Look, I think the number one thing we have to listen to is science and facts. And you have to make sure that you protect not just, your volunteers in the campaign, but the people at large. So we have not been door knocking. We've been calling a lot of people, phone banking a lot, and we've done some dropping literature, just on doors and then going away. But I know the cases in the district are better, but I think putting people at risk is just really, really important. You can't do that. People are concerned that cases are going to spike up again now because of the schools haven't opened up. So we got to be very careful and listen to science.
So I kind of, to put in a context what's happening in Texas right now, I kind of jokingly say this, but one of my few hesitations of taking the job at the Texas Tribune was I was worried there was not going to be enough to cover. There was one competitive race, the Texas 23rd, and now this is just, there are seats blowing up all over the state. There's campaigns everywhere. So there is a finite amount of money in the Democratic world that actually was changing a lot of that. The Houston media market is extremely expensive. What is your case to Democrats to support you in money to the party, to individual donors over other candidates in the state?
I think this is one of the most important races because Crenshaw is one of Trump's number one enablers, and he has just really, I think we're fighting for what somebody who made promises, went there and just joined the DC and just doesn't care. And he has other aspirations and just doesn't really care. And I have been in this incredible city for the past 30 years working to make sure as a mediator, as a community activist, to make sure that I bring people together and come up with solutions. And I'm running because I want to recover the health of our families, our economy, and our beautiful American dream. And I think somebody like Crenshaw, who has really put out lies and disinformation, who is even wanting to cut healthcare in the middle of the pandemic, not standing up for, anything that matters, but wanting to, with Trump on everything from voting against, the USPS, where millions of veterans are getting their medications, standing with Trump, not, condemning white supremacy, just somebody who just doesn't care about what matters. And more than anything, the dynamics of these districts have changed. They need someone who understands that. And I think people know that you need somebody who represents every single person that is in this district.
So I am a Fort Worth girl, and it pains me to say this sometimes, but when people outside of Texas are asking what's going on, I say, look at Houston. It is the single most interesting place in Texas with the trend lines where things are moving. And there is no place, I think, where the Democratic advance is coming harder than in Harris County. And it's fascinating to watch. But the other thing on that front is, in the new Congress, we're probably going to hear a lot of talk about a Green New Deal, and that could completely upend Harris County. Where do you come down on that? And does that make you anxious economically? Well, we all know that there's global warming, and it's a serious, existential concern.
Look, I want to make sure that we stay the energy capital of the nation. A lot of our jobs are because of it. So I believe in being all inclusive. We have to look at all the options. We have to move towards renewable energy, and creating jobs and building our infrastructure is the most important thing that we have to deal with. And right now, just in my district, we have 15,000 jobs that are with clean energy. So I'm taking the approach that we take all of it into ground. We accept all and don't put anything off. Whether we use natural gas as a transition, and we move towards renewable energy, look at nuclear possibilities as to how we can do that. I want to stay the energy capital of the world and protect the people and make sure that jobs are okay. And we're also resilient, and we're ready for the next flood that comes in. And we have the infrastructure and the funding coming from the federal government.
So when I talk to Republicans, many admit they're in a tough spot in Texas this year. But one of the things they say in their polling is that that the Democratic messaging nationally, which some of it hasn't necessarily been sanctioned by the party, but the idea of defund the police is very helpful to them politically. Do you support defunding the police?
I absolutely do not. I come from chaos and revolution. That's not what I want at all. I think we have to look at public safety another way. Budget is not what dollars and cents is. It's where we put our money. So we have to make sure there's money in education, in healthcare, in providing more opportunities to the communities. Also understanding that there is systemic racism that has to be addressed. And of course there is, the vice president said the other night, bad cops are bad for good cops, So I think it's very important to have serious control, like the Justice in Policing Act, ban chokeholds, ban no-knock warrants in drug cases, make sure there is oversight and, there is limited immunity and, take away qualified immunity. There are ways we can address this, and we have to address criminal justice reform. I was very involved with the races within this community, the 17 African-American women. I worked with them very closely. I'm very glad that I was part of that, already changing the face of criminal justice reform in Harris County. And to what you were saying before, this county, Harris County, this is the last sliver that is left, and that is why the change is going to happen.
So when I was able to go to districts and cover them, I covered the second congressional race in 2018, and I had just sort of a thunderstruck moment when I was interviewing a candidate. And he said, where we are standing now was underwater during Harvey. And it just sort of startled me. And freshmen don't have much clout, but what would you do if you were in Congress, either to prevent another Hurricane Harvey and to help the people who are still dealing with that right now?
We've had, I've personally swam home several times. Our car has been totaled. I'm still helping a lot of people who haven't had the proper funding to be back on their feet again. So more than anything, we got to be resilient. We have to change our studies as to what rainfall is, because it used to be 13 to 14 inches. Now it's like 24 inches. So push for new studies and make sure proper funding comes, to build our reservoirs. We don't know yet, if we build another one, if it needs to be bigger. And really the ship channel, we have to figure out what happens to that, because with the amount of oil and gas that is there, the amount of petrochemicals, just chemicals that are there, if another hurricane hits, it could be devastating for Houston. And what I would do is there is a lot of economic, I would say environmental injustice. There's a lot of illegal dumping in Black and brown communities. So that's something that I'm really passionate about, to make sure that there's consequences. And that's something that I would like to address. And also, again, going back to healthcare, we have like 90,000 kids with asthma. So making sure that we're able to have quality healthcare, that we can help them, because that's also pre-existing for COVID. So there's so many things that come together, but really try to get fast and proper funding, and then start building infrastructure to be ready for the next flood.
And so I have a viewer question from Raquel. What is the group Fairness and Democracy that you co-founded? What can you tell us about their work, the organization and its work?
So Fairness and Democracy we wanted to make sure that everybody has a voice, and we make voter registration as easy as possible. Basically, since we don't have online registration, and it was more towards really about making voter registration more available and bringing on more people to the table. And thankfully, what I've seen is that we've had a lot of those. We've had so many groups on the ground, and there's been other groups that have pushed this. And we've had, as I was saying, we've had more than 60,000 registrants just in my district.
One thing I do in my personal life is some advocacy on breast cancer. It's something that's been in my family history. How did you early detect your breast cancer?
Yeah, I was very lucky that I had access to have early detection. I was young. My children were young. My grandmother had passed away from breast cancer. And so I was watching it. And I think early detection is number one. What is very disconcerting to me is that in the middle of this pandemic, a lot of these life-saving treatments like breast cancer screenings are not available. Like even I have to go in for checkups every 6 months. And my doctor told me don't come in because they're worried for the pandemic. So that is a side effect of the pandemic that is very serious, because so many diseases are preventable if they are detected early. And of course, with having great insurance to be able to do that.
Do you intend to take a vaccine when they come out?
I think if there is science backing it and it's ready to go, yes, absolutely. But I've talked to Dr. Hotez here, and his take on it is that there won't be anything available for the next 6 months to a year.
And my last question for you is, it's trying to find some good in all of this very difficult year. We've all had to reorganize our lives and do new things and learn new things. And I would say one of the few good things for me is learning how to make real decent tacos. Is there one thing in the pandemic that has been good for you in this?
I think, again, more than anything, I know we're all become virtual, and I'm such a hugger, and I miss that so much. I miss seeing people. I miss really being able to have that one-on-one, but I've had more access because of this, because you're not driving around and connecting to people so much more. That has meant a lot to me. We've had more access because there's no drive time, and we're doing this, and hearing more from constituents of all walks. It doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, independent, young, old, whatever. Just being able to access a lot more people, a lot faster, a lot more frequently, and being able to hear their concerns. That has meant a lot to me.
We can't say thank you enough for your time here, and we want to thank our viewers for tuning in, and to AT&T for supporting today's event. Finally, a reminder that if you want to follow the latest election news with our weekly 2020 newsletter, go to trib.it/2020 to subscribe. Have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone, and take care.
Thank you so much, Abby. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.